have so many questions. Show me the answers. I'm afraid. Why am I here? I always think that chapter should be
Welcome back, everyone, to An Ordinary Search for Truth. My name is Nate, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about three attitudes, or what might be known as atmospheres, that greatly influenced my awakening process. These were probably the three most influential elements in my awakening process, and it's stages that I think a lot of people must move through as they learn more about non duality and about consciousness. I've found that a lot of times having two or more terms to kind of describe the same thing is very helpful, because all of us have different kind of conceptual baggage or connotation attached to certain words. So sometimes certain words don't work as well for some people in describing an experience as other words. So I've actually found two different words for each of these stages that I felt described a certain element or a perspective that you could view these stages from. So the first one is awareness or space. Those are the two terms that I found were most helpful in describing that particular concept. So awareness or space. The second one is acceptance or love. And then lastly, the third is surrender or being. So use whichever term you connect with or resonate with the best. I'm going to be trying to use them interchangeably for each stage. So I hope that that's not too confusing for you, and you recognize that it's just two different terms trying to describe the same subjective experience that we can have. And again, these are just based on my personal experience. So I didn't pull these particular elements out of any book or any video or teacher. These were just things that I noticed within my own personal development. So I thought, hey, maybe they'll help you as well. Maybe you can look at your own experience and think, oh, what stage am I at right now, and what stage does this maybe lead into? What kind of things can I be thinking about or feeling through in preparation for that? So let's start with the first attitude or atmosphere. Awareness slash space. Um, so when I first started on the non-duality path, there was a lot of talk about awareness or consciousness, the I am, the self-knowing principle within our experience. And at the start, I was still very much wrapped up in concepts and the thinking mind. And so I kept trying to understand what consciousness is. And when I ran into a lot of teachings that spoke about how consciousness can't be defined, consciousness can't be understood by the mind, that was really, really frustrating for me, because I was trying to use what I had used my entire life to understand everything, which was my mind. If it couldn't be defined or described or put into certain terms and boundaries and limits, then obviously the mind can't comprehend. It's like trying to imagine an infinite line or an infinite space. We can't do that because the mind is inherently limited to space and time. That's how it thinks through things. That's its capacity. And so to really get in touch with consciousness or awareness or the spaciousness that you are fundamentally, it was extremely difficult for me to start getting in touch with that. It seems like so ridiculous that it would be difficult to get in touch with our own consciousness because it is what we are. It's our most fundamental, irreducible element that we have within us. So it's really funny that sometimes it takes a lot of work to be able to recognize that. Um, Rupert Spira talks a lot about the screen, the clear screen, the empty screen, that then any movie or film could be shown upon. That it will take the form of any movie you play on it. But the only reason that that screen can do that is because it is inherently free of any of the qualities that the movies might have. You know, the colors, the shapes, all of these are expressed through the screen, but the screen itself is not inherently any of these things. And so consciousness is very similar to that, where consciousness does not have any particular qualities or descriptions or shapes, colors, sounds, any of these things that we experience within consciousness of our day-to-day lives. Consciousness is not inherently limited by those things. It's, if consciousness had this pink quality to it, then everything that we saw as consciousness would have this pink quality to it, almost like you're wearing a set of shades, a set of sunglasses with any certain hue. But that's not the case. And so, again, getting to this place where I could understand this kind of awareness, this consciousness, this thing that can't be described or understood by the mind, it has to be experienced. You have to use consciousness to know consciousness itself. And that took me a really, really long time to identify how to do that, how to turn consciousness back upon itself and really, look from that place instead of trying to look from this mental conceptual idea place. So that was the first kind of stage that I had to go through. It involved a lot of meditation, a lot of kind of this exploring the relationship between what I am as a self and what the world is as other, and really exploring that relationship and really kind of separating things or observable phenomena from my fundamental self, my consciousness. And so I had to cultivate a lot of awareness and this kind of spaciousness within which my experience was happening. In other words, awareness of what is, or spaciousness for what is to reside within. That's something that I had to cultivate. Then the second stage, acceptance, or what you could call love. Now that you've separated what you are as a self-consciousness and what other is as things and objects and changing experience, now that you've kind of separated those two, you start to incorporate this attitude of love, this attitude of acceptance, of allowance, allowing what is happening within your experience, within your awareness, within this space that you are, allowing that to be as it is. This is kind of the stage where you're quieting your mind even more. You're stopping the judgment that your mind wants to do all the time. You're not judging constantly. You're not criticizing constantly. You're not always mulling about, oh, I wish this was this way, or this should have been this way. You start to quiet that within your experience and try to cultivate this attitude or this atmosphere within yourself of just real acceptance. Just being like, you know what? This is happening within my consciousness, and it's fundamentally impermanent. Our experience is constantly changing. We are foolish if we think that we can, for any extended period of time, control the experience that we're having. It's constantly changing, constantly evolving. And so trying to control that or make static, make immovable this constantly impermanent experience is a really futile thing to do. That's why this attitude of acceptance, this attitude of love comes in, where you understand that you cannot control everything around you. You cannot control your experience. You cannot control what other people do, ultimately. And so if you cannot control it and you can't really get away from it, you're always experiencing. It's always happening, unless you're in deep sleep. There's experience happening. So you can't run from your experience. You can't run from the changing of the world. And you can't really control it. So what is there left to do? You can fight against it all you want. You can judge it all you want, criticize it all you want, break it down and analyze it and break it into pieces and separate it and all this divisive stuff. You can do that if you want. But it doesn't change anything. It doesn't help. It doesn't leave you feeling better than before you started doing that. So this second stage that I went through was really this very deep understanding of this impermanence of experience and the need to really just accept it for what it is in every moment, to accept and love your experience. And there was all sorts of other elements that went into this, that your experience is constantly teaching you something about yourself. How you respond to your experience is a reflection of how deep your understanding is. And in non-duality, especially, if you come to understand that truly nothing in life is separate, then let's say you're pursuing love or you're pursuing God. You want to be united with these things. In the non-dual understanding, you already are those things. You already are God. You don't have to look for God necessarily, like as if he's out there somewhere to unite with. You don't have to look for love. You don't have to find somebody to love you. That's not true unconditional love. True unconditional love is what you are. It is your truest self, your deepest, most fundamental self. So in this stage 2, you start to recognize some of that. But there's still this kind of ego operating in this second stage, this idea of, in the first stage, you were this consciousness knowing other things. You recognize that you are consciousness, that you are not things. And then in the second stage, you start to recognize that you kind of have to allow this experience. You have to accept it, to love it. But there's still kind of this self, this ego that's back here that's doing the allowing, that doesn't feel completely one with everything, because there's still this kind of this judge saying, okay, I see that I can't control my experience, so I'll allow it. I'll allow you to change like you do, and I'll not try to control you. But there's still this ego that's doing that, that's trying to do that anyway. This was kind of the second stage you go through. It's a critical stage to soften the ego, because once you start turning the ego toward love and acceptance, its foundations start to crumble, because the ego is built upon separating, analyzing, judging, criticizing. That's what the ego stands upon. So when you start directing your thoughts and your conscious awareness toward getting rid of some of that, toward being more accepting and more loving, less critical, then the ego naturally starts to break down and get softer and quieter in your experience, which then eventually leads to the third atmosphere or attitude within you, which is that of surrender, or that of pure being. And in this last stage, this is probably the most difficult stage to get to, because it's so radically deep and complete. When I say surrender, I mean everything. All of your ideas, all of your concepts, all of your thoughts, all of your ego, everything that you think you are, everything that you think the world is, all of your explanations for what is going on in reality, literally all of that, all of it, needs to be removed. Let go. Just, stop grasping onto all of these things and just relax. Let them go. But, that is not easy. It might sound easy the way I just said it, but it is absolutely it is so difficult, because the ego is a grasping. The ego is, this. Our ego wants to feel like it is something, like we are something very tangible, very, solid. And so the ego is this grasping motion within us. And we've identified with this so hard. We've clenched our fist, as you could say, so hard that this is the only way we know how to be now. We are so identified with our ego, with our separateness, with our uniqueness, you could say, our personality, what makes us different from everything else. We're so attached to that letting go is just kind of like a finger by finger, a thought by thought, concept by concept, identification by identification, slow, careful process. That's how it was for me. I wasn't one of those people that had this big aha transformative moment and just could let all of that go immediately. It took a long time, and it took incredible transformations, and I'm still doing it. I'm still in this stage of moving from acceptance and love, of me here accepting and loving the world and the experience out here, and merging the two, so that there is no separation, that I understand on a very deep experiential conscious level that what I believe that I am and what I believe that the world is, these are just imaginations that my mind has conceived of. That all of this separation that I imagine exists within me and everything else is imaginary. Where is it? Where does it exist? What is it made of? It's made of mind stuff, ultimately. And if you do really deep contemplation and meditation and explore non-duality deeply, you'll start to really experientially and tangibly see why this is the case. At first it seems absurd, but you'll start to recognize why this is the case and understand how you as a subjective observer and what you observe as objective, this differentiation doesn't exist. It's made up. It's all in your mind. It's what your mind has done. And it's not your fault. It's not an evil or terrible or bad thing, but you have to move through these stages of slowly closing that gap, recognizing that you are consciousness, that you are no longer this material object, you could say, that you are actually the consciousness. And you slowly start to realize how everything is within your consciousness. This spaciousness opens up. This bubble of consciousness starts to expand within you, and you realize, wow, I am this, and everything else is dependent upon this existing. Everything else is depending upon this bubble of consciousness that I am being present. And when that script gets flipped, where you, instead of you being this tiny conscious entity within this gigantic material world, this infinite material world starts to collapse into your bubble of consciousness, and realize that you cannot prove the existence of anything outside of your consciousness. You can't. Literally. And then when you transition into this acceptance and love, you start to get closer and closer to your experience and realize that consciousness doesn't care what the content of experience is. The content of our experience can be whatever, and consciousness will always be right there experiencing it, with absolutely no judgment, with no bias, with no criticism. It accepts everything as perfect, exactly the way it is. It's only our mind that does any of that stuff. But our consciousness, our awareness, that which we actually are, that's behind the thoughts, that's witnessing the thoughts, that is pure unconditional love. And so you start to move into the acceptance and love phase and realize this. And then lastly, but at that point you still feel like you are this thing that is loving everything else. And you can go very far with that. But at the end of the day, you have to collapse this last separation. You have to collapse this last idea that you are separate from your experience. That consciousness and what it is conscious of are the same thing. They are completely unified. And to do this, you have to surrender. You have to surrender to what is, to pure direct experience. You have to surrender to it. And you have to surrender all of your ideas to get to this place. This will allow you as consciousness to be just what you are, to just rest as pure existence, pure being itself. And when you hit this stage, I would drop into this space momentarily several times. You come out of that and your mind has nothing to say about it, because your mind was not present for this. Your mind cannot argue this experience. It cannot say, explain it away. You just know in this deepest part of you, you just know irrefutably that what you just experienced is so beyond the mind, so beyond the ego. It is it is infinite consciousness, infinite existence. You know, words just cannot come close to it. It is a uniting of self and other. to where there's no separation. You just, you become the very universe itself. And you know yourself as that. You know yourself as everything. And at the same time, you realize that it's all nothing, but that's a different video. Talking about nothing and everything. But that's as that's kind of the ground of being. That's the foundation. You you get to that place and there's nowhere else to go. It's like looking into a mirror at your own face and not recognizing it first. That's kind of the first stage, is you're looking into this mirror that is reality, and you see all sorts of things, but you don't realize that it's you. And then you get closer and closer to the mirror, and you start to recognize, oh, hey, that's me. Huh. But there's still this separation between the mirror and you, and what you're seeing and what you feel that you are. And so you get closer and you get closer and you get closer and you get closer until you become the mirror. There is no you, there is no reflection. You are just the mirror itself. And there's all sorts of metaphors and conceptual things that you can say to try to explain this, but ultimately concepts die here. Thoughts must die before you can experience this. You as a separate self must, metaphorically die, not literally, but metaphorically die. The ego must die for you to experience this. You must get rid of everything and anything within your worldview that even sort of hints towards separateness or distinctness or any of this stuff, and you have to literally see how it is false. You have to literally look at it and know with no doubts that that is an imagination. And when you see all of this stuff that you've built up your entire life as imagination, and you become aware of it, you've accepted this, you've accepted this fact, then you can move into just letting it go, just surrendering. Sacrifice it all. You don't need it. It's imaginary. It's false. It's not truth. It's not absolute truth. It's all relative. It's the mind's playground, but it's not your conscious place of being. That's not where you reside. You reside behind that, deeper than that. All of these three attitudes or atmospheres that you can cultivate, they cycle. You might move into recognizing awareness and then moving into this acceptance space, this very loving space, and then circling into, you might have a moment of surrender. Like you'll love, 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 unite, 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 and then you'll hit it, boom, surrender. You'll have this amazing, amazing experience of being what is. And then, your ego will start kicking back in, and you'll circle out of it. And around you go. But each time you move around, it's a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. And, you become more aware, you become deeply aware, you become more accepting, deeply accepting. You surrender more. And each time you come around, you kind of stay in these higher states for longer and longer and longer. You experience these beautiful states of consciousness for longer and longer. And I'm still doing that. I'm still circling, just like all of us. I'm still on this journey but I've been through all three stages several times. I've experienced, these lower stages of awareness and acceptance more often than I've experienced surrender and being. But I've experienced that, and it's 100% worth 100% worth it. You fear losing so much, and I did too. I feared losing so much, but when you get to the point where you can let go, where you can let it go and accept that you are infinite reality, that you are infinite consciousness, and that everything that you experience and what you think is yourself, that all of that is happening within this reality. It's like a beautiful play. It's like the most hyper realistic virtual reality game that can exist, because literally God is creating it right here, right now. You are God. You are creating it right here, right now. And everything that is you, because you are isness. So I guess to conclude this, I feel like I've talked a lot and it's probably very confusing. I don't know. I did my best. It's very difficult to explain this process. But you could say that in the beginning, you believe that there's material and that you are somehow within that. You're encased in that. That material is primary. And then the stage one is recognizing that you are actually consciousness. And you're trying to kind of figure out what that is, but ultimately it's kind of empty. But you're trying to figure this part out, but you recognize that you are consciousness, and you separate yourself from this material world. That's stage one. You create some space and you recognize the space within you. And then stage two, acceptance and love. This is learning to love this relationship, learning to love this side, learning to love this side. And it's a journey of moving them closer together and understanding how this relationship really operates. And then and so that's quite a long process. That's very difficult to do. But then finally they just merge together like this. What you understand to be consciousness and what you understand to be what you experience as consciousness, these things, the separation decreases and decreases and decreases. You get rid of more stuff that you've placed between this understanding. All of these concepts and ideas and explanations and scientific, explanations, religious explanations, personal beliefs, all of this stuff, you start getting rid of it. And they get closer and closer. And then unity, non-duality, being, God, absolute truth, knows itself as this. You know yourself for what you truly are. And like I say, you probably won't stay there permanently. But once you see that this exists, that this is possible, no matter how many times you get sucked back out, you know a little bit better how to get back. And you start going so far away each time until you're just going like this, um, and then you can stay there. I don't know if that can happen in your lifetime or my lifetime or anyone's. I'm sure it is possible. I'm sure it does happen with many of these enlightened masters and teachers. I'm sure that they exist like this most of the time. Probably, but I don't know. That's outside of my consciousness. I am not them. All I know is my personal experience. All I know is my personal consciousness. That's all I can prove. That's all I have to work with. My direct experience is all I have. And your direct experience is all you have. So that's where my focus is and where your focus should be. And really, it's the only doorway to this place. It's the only doorway to this experience of God is through you, because you are it. You can't go through me and somehow do that. No, 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 no. It's all going this way. Just like for me over here, it's all going this way. But that's all we know, is right here, right now, and our own experience. And so I challenge you to work with your experience, cultivate this sense of awareness, this attitude or atmosphere of awareness and space within yourself. Become conscious of your own consciousness and experience, and then learn to accept that and love that and be okay with that. And then lastly, surrender all the stuff that's keeping you away from unconditional love. Surrender everything that's getting in the way of knowing yourself as this. And lastly, just rest in it. Rest in being what is. Stop trying to add stuff to it and make it all complicated. It's not complicated. It's only complicated when the mind gets involved and tries to explain it. That's when it gets complicated. But really, it's this. It's this. Even before I say it's this, come to know that. Non-duality can take you there if you are serious about it. If you really want peace, if you really want to be free, if you really want to know what is true, there's a way to do that. There's an understanding that can give you that. Anyway, I will conclude this video here. I've already talked for far too long, but I hope maybe I've shed some light on this subject and given you some areas to work on, some things to point your awareness towards, and some atmospheres within yourself that you can start to cultivate and move through. And I sincerely hope that you get to that final understanding, that deepest understanding. I hope that you can get there and experience what love and peace and truth is waiting there for you. Thank you so much for watching. I love hearing from you. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of this material. Positive or negative, go ahead and reach out. I'm open to that. And if you want to receive notifications for future videos and future content, go ahead, hit subscribe, hit that bell, and like if you want to support what I'm doing here. And I so appreciate you staying to the end and being a true seeker of truth. If you're still here watching, that is what you are, and I'm so thankful for you. And I'm excited for you. I hope that you find what it is that you're looking for. So thank you, and I will see you in the next video. Don't worry, I've got a lot more content for you to enjoy. Click the link to the right to see a video that goes hand in hand with what you just watched. On the left is a playlist I recommend you check out. And down below you can see my latest video release. Your support means the world to me, so thank you.